Hello, I am Megan Ferricane, and this is my artist portfolio presentation. My earliest memory is in Gainesville, Florida, where I was sitting in the magnolia tree in my backyard, weaving together magnolia leaves using pine needles. When I wasn't climbing into the trees, I was carving into the dining room table with a paperclip, drawing on the walls, and even scratching a design into my father's truck. From Gainesville, we moved to Jacksonville, where I spent my teenage years, and I was lucky enough to have a wonderful graphic design teacher named John J. Lott. And it was in his class that he taught me how to screen print, and I won an award for a screen printed t-shirt of Fiona Apple. At that point, I thought that I would enjoy graphic design, and I went to Maryland Institute College of Art, but quickly discovered that that kind of competitive, expensive program wasn't for me. So I returned to Florida with my Florida Bright Futures scholarship and got an Associate of Art at what was then Florida Community College. After that, I entered the workforce, where I became an early childhood teacher, and it was there that I found a passion for the importance of art in the development of young children. This has led me to returning to school and getting a bachelor in painting, drawing, and printmaking at University of North Florida. When I was 10 years old, I wrote a list of rules for living because I was a very sage and wise 10-year-old. And my number one rule for living was to love and admire art. This was furthered by my Aunt Margie, who put a paintbrush in my hand when I was a teenager and struggling with some things and taught me how to landscape paint. A lot of my work has drawn inspiration from feminism, such as musician Ani DeFranco, artist Frida Kahlo, Kiki Smith, and so many others. I also find a lot of inspiration from artists like Marc Chagall and Mary Cassatt, whose love of everyday life shows unabashedly through their work. This is a painting of mine that drew direct inspiration from Mary Cassatt's Two Little Sisters, and it's Two Peas in a Pod. It's a large-scale painting of my son Patrick and his best friend Kaya. Many of the themes and much of the content in my work is found from the complexity I find in life. I often find magical and mundane to coexist, and my work is full of the color and feeling that these evoke in me. The topics frequently revolve around that relationship with family and nature. When I'm working through a theme, an idea, or a concept, I often find that the triggering subject is not what the work itself is about. For instance, in this series of birds that I did in both painting and printmaking, the birds began as thinking about the loss of habitat and the diversity of birds, but quickly the birds began to symbolize to me the diversity we can find within humans, and in particular my own family. For example, this is an oil painting of a chickadee, but it's also an oil painting of my son Patrick. When I'm interested in an idea, I research it, debate it, think about it, write about it in my journal, and explore it in different artistic mediums. Here's a collage of a chickadee and a relief of a crow. While we were studying the birds, my son realized that we have fairies in our magnolia tree, and quickly after that, we learned that we have hobgoblins living in the cabinets, banging around the dishes in the cupboards late at night. My husband, seen here in a dry point etching, and I quickly realized that our son might very well be part hobgoblin, with his sweet, kind nature and mischievous spirit. So I depicted that with a Chincolet dry point etching called Hobgoblin. While my process begins in a cerebral place, I revel in the steps in the method because it is in the process that I process my existence in this world. Here, I was working through the time that a wolf nibbled on my lip, and I made a silkscreen monoprint of her, and on the right, you can see an aqua tint print of my cat Biggie that I lost earlier this year. In this slide, you can see my bell jar process of a painting I did in relation to the pandemic. I was processing the implications of breathing air that could make me sick or kill me, while also the mental health implications of being isolated and afraid of other people. My most recent work began last winter when in the Everglades I came across an alligator skeleton, and it coincided with some pondering I was doing on how inevitable death is. I embarked upon an exploration of the mirroring I find between the seasons of a year and the human lifespan. In this slide, you can see the first intaglio plate I made of death or winter. I've titled this body of work The Seasons of My Life. This is an intaglio print of spring. Here I am in my magnolia tree. My summer print, intaglio etching, is about how youth is tenuous and temporary and is often robbed by predators. I inadvertently explored this theme in lithography as well when I made this print of honeymoon and young love. It is often in the cusps of the seasons that our lives take a turn and change. And the seasons will change whether or not we're ready for them to change, and we find ourselves traveling down the road. We do our best to immortalize the precious moments in our lives and hold on to them even as time goes on. In this intaglio print, I'm showing how life is beautiful even when the beauty of our youth is at our backs. But the end always comes too soon. Here are some references for the artists whose images I used other than my own. Thank you for listening to me speak, and I'd also like to thank my husband, who's my muse, my emotional support sloth, Squirty, and my son Patrick, who is a constant inspiration in my life. And a huge thank you to John J. Lott and Shayla Golobratko, whose teaching is an inspiration to us all.